Hey gang, what's up? So, a couple of months ago I said if I were to hit 100 subscribers, I would rank every Disney animated film from Snow White to Disney's latest outing with Wish. We hit that milestone. Woo. I've grown up watching Disney animated films and I really love the studio. For this video, I rewatched all of the animated films and made notes along the way to rank them as I was going along. Think I'm happy with the order I ended up with? This is personal preference, so please don't at me in the comments. This is completely subjective, and I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments. Send me a top 10, I'd love to see them all. I always do read the comments. Bear in mind that I was born in the mid-2000s, so have a lot of nostalgia towards films around that time, and will be more critical of films that came out after that point, i.e. all of their CGI films in the last 2 decades. Previous films like the Renaissance and the classic Disney era films I am less judgmental towards, as they were set in stone well before my existence. There are 2 official films that technically count as Disney animation, but I'm not going to for this list, those being the Fantasias. In my mind, these should be put in a separate category as they're more live concerts rather than films. You then get these animated sequences to accompany the music, rather than it being an actual story in itself for an hour and a half or so. Everything else will be counted on this list, making there 60 films to rank. Oh boy, this is going to be a lot of fun, and I apologise for that in advance. Anyway, thanks for the support on this channel so far to let me get to this point. It really means a lot, and I just want to keep growing and experimenting and see what happens. Let me know what you think I should rank for the next milestone I want to hit. I'll probably put a poll up in a few days' time. So, let's get into this long one. We're going to go through these from 60 down to number 1. For each, I've made a list of good things and bad things about the film, so let's get right on into this. Speedrun. Number 60, Make Mine Music. This is one of the films that Disney released during the World War, and it doesn't actually exist, so I couldn't watch it. Therefore, I've put it at the bottom of the list as it rounds to 60 rather than 59 films. Let's quickly skip over this. 59, Aristocat. Now this is one that I have a grudge against for some reason. It does have a nice animation style, and Edgar is the right sort of villain for this story. However, the stereotypes in this film were not good at all. The songs were annoying, the family of cats were irritating, Marie the cat is the most useless thing in the world that is such a liability, everyone's accents are a pain, and the Chinese cat playing piano with chopsticks needs no further explanation. Ugh, I do not like this film. It has to go right at the bottom because I actively hate on this film rather than a lot of the others that are coming up that I just don't particularly like but have no emotions towards. This one, outright, no thanks. 58, Dinosaur. Well, this one begins very dark. The meteor apocalypse is sure a nice, cheery start for a children's film. However, the bad certainly outweighs the good on this one. The CGI does not hold up. It's unforgivable seeing as Toy Story came out before this. The story isn't great either, and the execution even less so. I generally feel nothing towards this film though, as it just was really flat. So let's move on. 57, The Three Caballeros. So the next few are all the wartime films, and they fit into this area as none of them are consistent stories the whole way through and have lots of little short films that make up the story. This one gets wins from me from the penguins and the flying donkeys in it, but Donald Duck is annoying, there are real people which I don't particularly like in these sort of animated films, and it's just kind of repetitive. It's harmless, but the dancing just gets boring after a while. 56, Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. This one is a film of 2 halves, literally. The Mr. Toad aspect I'm not particularly a fan of, as Mr. Toad is a really annoying character, whereas the Ichabod stuff I like more. I really wish they did more with the Headless Huntsman, and maybe he could return in future in some other adaptation. Ichabod is a very creepy school teacher though. Each story is paced well, but the stories are particularly dull and not very explored. 55, Melody Time. The short stories to this one are a bit wild. The Ice Skaters is fun, the cowboy one is crazy, and the woman getting bounced to the moon at the end of it. Now, the war films will feel like a bit of a fever dream to me, so when I look down my notes and find in the bad section a comment saying, "she has no nose," I'm very confused by this. Anyway, this again has real people in it, the second short story doesn't go anywhere, and the Samba Bar bit was also a bit of a weird fever dream. 54, Fun and Fancy Free. Another war one. This one's got Jiminy Cricket in it, which is quite nice. Bonzo Bear was cute, and it was nice to see Mickey and the gang. This is another harmless one. However, there are these creepy dolls with real people's faces on them, and it gets a bit strange. The comments with the war ones is that they tried to blend animation and real people as they didn't have the budget for these sort of things, but that just made it look really scary and weird. 53, Saludos Amigos. Now thank God this one is only 42 minutes, so I don't need to sit through this one for too long. There is a lot of good cartoon comedy here, but again it's got real people, and there's a bit where they separate male and female into different planes when flying around, which is a choice. 52, Ralph Breaks the Internet. The one good thing I have here is that the world building is kind of good. The world of the internet is interesting, though it has a lot of flaws. The bad, I have a long list, namely saying Ralph over and over again as his character has gone completely out of the window since the first film. The whole BuzzTube thing I was not on board for, and the main plot just isn't worthwhile. Ralph has just become this really insecure man-child, and it's a massive shame seeing as his arc in the first film was really exciting and worthwhile. Penelope is fine, she gets her own thing with the Disney princesses, which I have conflicting opinions on, seeing as the sequences are fine, but I really don't like that they're in the film in the first place. If you haven't already, don't bother seeing this one, I could have gone without it, but have now seen it twice. 51, Chicken Little. Well, the good thing I have about this film is the character Fish, who was just a fish wearing an astronaut helmet who didn't really do anything, but he's quite good fun. My main two issues with this film are the CGI, which is very frantic. Disney were using an experimental new CGI style during the early 2000s, and this one really didn't work. The other thing is that the story is all over the place. There are aliens, there are random fairy tale characters all over the place, the ugly duckling is just hanging around because why not, and the core conflict with trust is a bit of a weird choice. Number 50, Peter Pan. Now this is a sweet fairy tale, but I have a lot of issues with it. Namely, that Peter Pan is an absolute dick. Everyone in Neverland is really mean, especially all the mermaids. It's just not a nice environment at all. And the Red Indians have not aged well at all. Anyway, the TikTok croc is fun. Tinkerbell being the true villain of the story trying to kill Wendy is an absolute laugh. And the bear being confused by the teddies was hilarious. Captain Hook is a fine villain, and just generally everyone trying to murder Wendy the whole time is the only good part of the film. 49, Home on the Range. I love the western setting of this film and really want Disney to go back to this period. The twist surrounding the character Rico is quite good, and having Judi Dench as one of these cows is so funny for me. However, where this film suffers are the characters, the villain, and the plot really, which is most of what makes up a film. 48, Sleeping Beauty. Now this is a nice easygoing story that cements itself as one of Disney's highlights. Maleficent is a scary badass character that, too right, she should be upset for not being invited to that party. She is by far the best part of this film, and I'm really glad that in the slew of horrible live action remakes they chose to make one about her rather than Sleeping Beauty herself. This film is very much a product of its time with being a really minimal story, and Aurora is such a basic character who doesn't do anything. The songs aren't too memorable and the pacing is all over the place. And does Maleficent have a thing against killing? Because she so could have murdered everyone in that film. But yes, I like that it sticks to the roots of being a classic fairy tale, and I really hope that Disney takes this on in the future again. 47, Wish. Conceptually, this is a decent film and Aaron DeBose is great. What's bad about it is that it has so much potential and doesn't do anything else with it. If you want to hear my thoughts on this one, I've made a proper review on this, so go check that out. Number 46, Pocahontas. Well, this one has Miko and Flick in it, and they're quite good, and Just Around the River Bend and Colours of the Wind are banging songs. The Renaissance era of Disney really mastered the balance of scale, and Grandmother Willow is an interesting character. Then we get to the bad stuff. The characters are all very one-dimensional, and so is the story. Pocahontas and John Smith are really, really bland, and the villain, whatever his name is just really boring. Other than the two songs I already mentioned, the rest of the music isn't great. I'm not really a fan of Savages, although it seems to be one that stands out from this film. Something I did find interesting is that they solved the language gap immediately. I would have preferred them to take a different angle with this and maybe use sign language through the film to communicate between John and Pocahontas. Maybe it would make them both a little more interesting. 45, Dumbo. This is good as it has disability awareness. However, there is a lot of bad things too. Is the train sentient? And also, what was that whole fever dream with the pink elephant parade? This is another case where it's a classic, so I respect what it is, but because of its time, it's very simple. What I did find was there's a lot of time mocking Dumbo for its big ears, and then he learns to fly way too quickly. It would have been nice to see him work this more. It's a case of there's disability context in this, but you don't see him working through it, and that's a really key important message. 44, Oliver and Company. This one's good as the characters aren't super annoying, which is a change for the animal films from Disney. I'm a big fan of the New York vibe, and the dynamic between the dog gangs is quite cool. Where this film suffers is the songs are okay but not memorable. Oliver is a passive protagonist and doesn't really get involved, and there's a very chaotic fight scene on the train at the end. Sykes seems like a cool villain at first, but it's pretty rubbish at the end and just stays in his car. 43, The Sword and the Stone. The good things about this is the wolf that tries to eat Arthur at the beginning is quite funny. Merlin is so angry and I love it, Mim is crazy and I love it, and the wizard jewel is fun and vibrant. The songs in this film are a bit weird, and Arthur's singing is to be desired. The film takes a weird angle as there's more animal meandering rather than actually learning how to do wizardry. Mim should have been in the film for a lot longer, she's only in it for about 10 minutes and that's the closest this comes to a villain, and it's a bit of fun but nothing to do with the sword. Arthur doesn't really do anything to do with that line until right at the end of the film. Number 42, The Fox and the Hound. The character designs in this film are really lovely, and none of the characters are too annoying. The goodbye between the two characters is really lovely, and there's a decent conflict throughout. Copper and Todd have a really solid friendship. However, the villain again is not great. The bear is also not really set up. I would have been fine with there being a bear there if there was a bit of foreshadowing towards it, and I don't feel like the goodbye hits too hard because we don't spend too much with the old lady. The titular fox and hound have a good relationship, but not with the owners on screen. 41, Brother Bear. The On My Way song is quite nice, and Phil Collins does an excellent job with this film after he did Tarzan. This follows a classic liars revealed plotline, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but the realization scene is actually handled quite nicely. The opening dynamic between the three brothers is quite endearing, and it's a shame that one of them has to die for the plot to continue, even though it's all kind of for nothing. Like, I get why the older brother has to die, but the way he dies is avoidable. The resolution in this film isn't too strong, which is what brings it down. Breaking into the top 40, Raya and the Last Dragon. Now I'm going to get some hate on the next few as we go to the more recent films. I thought the world building in this one had potential but wasn't explored very much. It gave me very much Avatar and the Last Airbender vibes. There were also too many characters being introduced too late into the plot and sometimes even into the third act. There was one standout in Boone, the kid who would be on the boat, but apart from that I didn't really get to know any of these characters. The central theme of trust is so overdone, and it goes from you should not trust anyone to you should trust everyone, and there is not that in real society. Sisu is really irritating. I've got to be honest, I'm not a fan of Awkwafina in this role, and the design of the dragons is just a bit odd to me. Raya as a character is fine, but her conflict with Namari needed more depth. Number 39, Big Hero 6. The setup and world building for this was fantastic. I loved the blend of San Francisco and Tokyo. When I started this film, I was really hopeful for it. The dynamic between the brothers is really interesting, there is a central plot thread with the microbots, and the side characters are bearable. Then we get to the dramatic scene that everyone loves, where the brother gets, spoilers, murdered, and from there on in the film it just goes downhill for me. The emotions don't hit the same way after his death, and the reveal with the twist villain is stupid. I wasn't even surprised as a little kid, like they try to push it in one direction so hard and then pull the rug under you that you're completely expecting it, and it's really rather strange. It's just too on the nose all round, there is no subtlety that makes up this film. However, Hero and Baymax are interesting characters, Fred on the other hand not so much, but the whole superhero thing is a bit different for what Disney goes for. I get that they were jumping on the comic book trend, but I don't think they stuck the landing. Number 38, The Black Cauldron. This is a film that, again, has a lot of potential and is very much a product of its time. What is it with Disney and coming up with great ideas and then not expanding them to their fullest? Anyway, the Horn King looks really cool, and the setting of the medieval fantasy land is excellent, especially for a fan of things like Lord of the Rings over here. Where this film falls apart though is the lead characters aren't particularly interesting and deep. Googie is an annoying little side character and the resolution is way too easy. The rules of the cauldron aren't really expanded on, and the Horn King goes out without a fight, and it's quite funny to be fair. Number 37, Robin Hood. Wow, this is a film with excellent pacing and a really easygoing story. I respect that in this time Disney wasn't doing too well and they recycled a lot of archived footage, but they handled it quite nicely, and overall the film looks stunning. And I'm not just saying the character designs. Although everyone I know seems to have a crush on the Fox characters. What is it with that? I love how pathetic Prince John is, and Robin doesn't really have any struggles throughout the film, which is my issue with it. Disney protagonists used to have everything so easy, and that doesn't make the best stories in my eyes. Number 36, Bambi. Another case of, it's classic, it means a lot, there we go. Bambi isn't too annoying as a protagonist, and Bambi's mum's death is actually really sad. There's a reason people keep coming back to this film, and particularly that scene. It's at this point on the list as it's still quite basic and the songs aren't great, the characters aren't very deep, and so on. 35, Frozen 2. I love the autumn setting for this. It would make sense if the third film that they're inevitably going to do is set during winter. Into the Unknown is an absolute banger, and Olaf's song and Lost in the Woods aren't too bad either, though they're slightly overrated in my opinion. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Disney sequels in general. I liked when with the Renaissance films they used to do straight to DVD ones, but I'm not loving the theatrically released ones because they should feel like proper movies still. This film was in production hell, and the fact that it became the highest grossing animated film ever, I do not agree with. That was purely because it was the sequel to Frozen, and it doesn't have anything on its own back to add. I like that Elsa has a bit more character this time round, but it comes at the cost of everyone else. The film should have focused more on Anna and her journey. Half the film is taken up by mocking the previous film, and there's a lot of exposition in this one, also through memory ice watered stuff, that is just so contrived and I don't vibe with it. The main conflict and conflicts between characters are not thought out, and Arendelle should have been destroyed by that flood at the end. The logical ending for that film would have been that Arendelle and the Northuldra merge and take on a new city, but this didn't happen. Also, ice is not the fifth spirit. I'm not going to dwell on it too much as it's been said across the internet tons already, but it's a form of water, it's not its own thing. Number 34, Zootopia. Nick Wilde, great character. Flash and the other sloths, they're good fun. But then there's Judy, who I'm not the biggest fan of. She gets the job done, but isn't the most interesting protagonist. This was in Disney's phase of twist villains and doesn't do it particularly well. Understanding of predators and prey in this also suffers, and most of the characters are just a bit bland. I don't find the mystery very enticing at all, and that is basically the whole plot. I have no idea what they're going to do in a Zootopia 2, and I have a fear that it's not going to be great like the other sequels recently. Number 33, continuing with the CGI films, Strange World. Now people are going to probably be surprised I put this above things like Big Hero 6, but I actually quite like this film. The concept of Pando being an energy plant is quite interesting, and I like that it takes risks and tries to be different with its narrative. I appreciate when Disney takes the extra mile rather than just playing it safe. And although this doesn't land all the way, I appreciate the effort. The family domestic plot is quite relatable, and Ethan as a character is quite entertaining to watch. However, not all of the characters are as endearing as him, as the granddad is quite insufferable, but I understand why. This generational divide was something that stuck with Disney for the last few years, especially in this and Encanto, and I gotta say the other film was better. The concept overall was interesting, but I did feel like the ending was quite messy. It left it very open-ended, but they still carried on living the same sort of life without their power source. Like, how does that happen? Number 32, Winnie the Pooh. This is a film that's really faithful to its source material, and doesn't go wrong in any aspect really. The only thing I'd say is that it's really short, and because it's so faithful to the book and plays into that aspect, it doesn't have room to grow in its own right. Number 31, we have The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Now this is the more recent version of this, that is a longer version fixing that problem, but more or less just has the same issue with being an adaptation and so faithful to that. It's great to see these characters in a little bit more depth, but that's not there all the way and it's still designed to be a storybook. These two Pooh stories are really good as you know what you're going to get and you don't get anything more than that. Yay, you've made it halfway through the video. Thanks for watching. That's all I really want to say. Keep going. We'll get to the top one soon. Number 30, Cinderella. Now this is a classic fairy tale that doesn't try to justify the existence of many aspects such as the fairy godmother, and it doesn't need to because it's just happy being itself. The villains in this story are a highlight. The two sisters are manic and crazy, whereas you've got Lady Tremaine being your full form of evil that creates the story. Alongside her you have Lucifer, who is a blimmin' evil cat that is just wonderful to watch. However, this does have many flaws due to the time it was released. The mice singing is absolutely irritating, and the prince's character doesn't really exist. Number 29, The Rescuers Down Under. This is the second film in this series, and it's quite enjoyable for the ranks of Disney sequels coming out more recently. Now, this is inferior to the original, but I appreciate that we get to spend more time with the villain and the captive at the beginning of the film. This feels like a lesser version of the original, and the rescuers themselves don't feel as integral to the story, which with a few changes could have made a lot of difference. Now, this is an issue with Disney where they will shoehorn in sequels when in fact this could have been its own thing, if the villain was a little bit more exciting. Number 28, Frozen. Now, this is one where the songs are great but the story kind of falls apart, and people are willing to overlook that in the common day due to its animation style and general success financially. The point at which I like this film is when it deals with Anna and her storyline in travelling up the mountain with Kristoff, and Olaf can actually be funny in this film. However, Elsa is a badly written character and should have been straight up the villain or had a better motivation. In the original source material written by Hans Christian Andersen called The Snow Queen, Elsa's character was the villain, and they changed this to make it more of a sisterly approach, which I respect, but it doesn't work for me. It could have worked better if the villain they replaced it with made more sense. Hans is a twist villain that doesn't work. He should have been established with his motivations far earlier on, rather than just this 5-minute twist at the end. The trolls are really annoying and vague, and their song is not great. It's the worst one in the lineup. Generally, this film has a third act issue, and the pacing gets weird around this point. This is a film from Disney that I'd be willing to look into to maybe rewrite or tell the original story a bit, so let me know if you want to hear that. Number 27, Treasure Planet. Now, Jim is a protagonist from Disney that I can actually get behind. Seeing John Silver as a villain from the beginning and knowing the twist is going to happen really helps this film, and it's something that Frozen could have learned from. The setup in this film is on point, and using this blend of CGI and 2D kind of works for it. Morph is also a fun little side character. However, where this film falls apart for me is that it doesn't actually spend long on the Treasure Planet itself, which I feel is a little bit underwhelming due to its premise. Also, Ben. Ben is a robot character that I absolutely hate, and I don't know why, but I do not vibe with this guy, sorry. Number 26, Pinocchio. Now, this is one that I expected to be a lot lower, as the actual story itself I'm not particularly a fan of, but it's more the case of the influence this film has had over the studio. This is a case where, being the second film that they produced, I hold other films that came out after this to it, in saying that this should really be lower. When You Wish Upon a Star is absolutely iconic, and it's a wonderful fairy tale setup that delivers on the promises it set. The whale coming out of nowhere, I guess, is a bit of a bad part of it, but it's a fairy tale, so things like this happen. And also them using smoking was a choice. Number 25, Lady and the Tramp. Now, I've got a note here saying, how did Sleeping Beauty come after this? Like Pinocchio, this is an early on film that other films should be hiring the bar on. The best spaghetti in town and the quickest service. Another note I've got here. Very true. This film has a limited plot though, and seems to set a trend for plots not being fully developed in other films. 24, Alice in Wonderland. What a wacky film. The pacing in this is actually great and it makes no sense, but I love this film. The animation for its time is on point, and is a very faithful adaptation of its source material. Alice would make such a good Dungeons & Dragons player who wants nothing to do with the side quests and simply wants to plow on with the main plot. This film feels like a fever dream and there is a lot going on the entire time. Number 23, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Once again, mad respect for this being the first film. I think probably what made this so high up on here, as it kind of established animation in the first place, so not noticing this would be absolute heresy. Damn, the evil queen really doesn't get enough respect for how ruthlessly evil she is. Like, she wants to put Snow White's heart in a box. The musical timing and pacing of this film is on point, and Snow White riffing all over the place is an absolute dream. Also, the character design in this film is on point. There are always going to be drawbacks though. Grumpy is a misogynist, the prince is very flat, and the evil queen's death is cool but not earned by any of the characters she's killed by the vultures. I can't wait to see them muck this one up in live action. Number 22, The Rescuers. Does Disney just associate mice with rescuers and detectives? That seems to be a common theme. The music in this film slaps, and it has a lovely travel montage at the beginning that had to be noted. I found this funny that the plot of this is essentially Aladdin before Aladdin did Aladdin. The whole diamond thing. Madame Medusa has decent evil motivation, and this girl is cray. but she does kind of seem like a rip-off of Cruella de Vil. Overall, everything just could have been more developed, and that's kind of a credit to its time. Also, how did they get home at the end? Oh well. 21, Jungle Book. Barbershop Quartet Vultures, tick. Baby Elephant, tick. That whistling monkey is a diva, tick. These notes are also weird. The elephants of this film are actually the highlight to me, like the old ones just telling war stories, fab. Chikan is beaten way too easily. For the setup he gets, they just get rid of him with the fire, which is an absolute Deus Ex Machina. Mowgli is a bit brain dead, but I guess he's just kind of a child. And if Bagheera knew that village was there, why didn't he just take the kid there in the first place? Oh well, that's me taking apart the fairy tale aspect of this, which I shouldn't really do. 20, 101 Dalmatians. I love dogs. I don't know if there's much more I need to say. This film is actually so dark. Cruella is evil, and I admire how far Cruella is willing to go to get her fur coat. There is actually a plot here, and all the characters are done with good motivation, so props to that. There's only one song in this film, but it is a banger. It's weird that they go halfway with musicals at this point in time. And hang on, didn't all those Dalmatians at the end belong to other people and were stolen? They've just kind of second-hand stolen a bunch of puppies. Thank God Jasper was so stupid, otherwise they would have actually been successful. 19, The Great Mouse Detective. This is one I hadn't seen until I watched it for these set of rewatches. And actually, it was really quite good. Ratigan was a cool and evil villain, Basil was annoying, which was good because that's what the character should be like, and I loved the whole plot with building the Machine Queen, and it's a fresh take on Sherlock Holmes. It is on the short side with not much depth, but I can get by with this one. 18, Mulan. Now, this is one of the weaker films in the Renaissance, which is crazy because it's so good. Make a Man Out of You is my go-to workout song when and if I do that. Overall, the score and songs in this film are beautiful. It's just a shame there are only 4 songs and not more than that. My favourite sequence in the film is when Mulan makes the choice to go to the war. The score in this section is perfect. The film kind of falls apart with its villain though. He doesn't really feel human, which is a bit of a disservice seeing as this was based on a many historical event. Also, Mulan's kill count is unmatched by anyone in Disney, seeing as she wiped out an entire army with an avalanche. 17, Meet the Robinsons. A very underrated film in Disney's ranks, seeing as it came out in the early 2000s. The animation style wasn't quite down yet, but I have a lot of nostalgia towards this film. The story is really thought out and the timeline works, and Lewis and Wilbur are great characters and they have this really good connection. Bowler Hat Guy is a great villain, if we can even call him that, because it's really that hat that is the bad guy behind it all. I don't really get the resolution because why does Lewis have to go to the hat to tell it that he's not going to make it? Surely he can just think it and that doesn't work, but I guess they wanted a physical conclusion. I think the Meet the Robinsons part of Meet the Robinsons could have been more fleshed out, and this may have been with removing some of the characters as there are a lot to get around. Overall, I have a soft spot for this one, and I just love it as a time travel science fiction film. It's a good stretch for Disney. 16, Bolt. This absolutely shouldn't be this high up on this list, but sorry. This is a heavy nostalgia one that I have seen millions of times. Let's rattle through why that is. Little Bolt is adorable, the score is great, it's a fun concept, the pigeons are funny, Catty in the caravan park is hilarious, Pretty to be a Dog montage is hilarious, recasting Penny at the end is fun. So yeah, I just really love this film. The human CGI is a bit creepy. And the concept is weird because how does that actually work? I just love how irrational it is. The third act fire at the end is very contrived, but works the story. 15, The Princess and the Frog. The pacing is on point for this film. The music, especially Friends on the Other Side, is an absolute bop, and Dr. Facilier as a whole is a very underrated villain. I love that this is still 2D, and it's sad that it moved into 3D after this point, although financially the film didn't do too great. I really love the other type of animation they have with her almost dream sequences early on. However, Lewis the Crocodile is slightly irritating to me, and the shadow monsters that follow them around are a very passive threat. It turned out that the conclusion was very quick, and the pacing kind of fell apart at this point. It's a bit of a shame because throughout the rest of the film it's solid, but then it just basically turns into a montage by the end. 14, Tarzan. Now, for a while I thought this was my least favourite of the Renaissance films, but I've since had this grow on me, and Phil Collins' vocals are actually quite good for it. I didn't particularly like that this wasn't a musical but still had songs in it, but to be honest, seeing Tarzan sing could have been a bit of a weird one. Crashing the Camp is such a weird, non-song type thing, and Turk, who leads it, is a really irritating character. However, The opening of this film, my god does it go hard. There's no time to pause and this montage is breathtaking. It's got good comedy throughout and its use of montages to tell the story are really impactful. I also like that when Tarzan's around the humans he stops speaking English but you can understand him when he's around the animals. It's a really nice touch that you don't really notice and that's the point. Number 13, The Emperor's New Groove. Now, I'm really interested to know what this would have been like if it stuck to its original plans as being called The Kingdom of the Sun, but this film came out to be really strong after all of its production problems. It's comedy gold and really plays into all of the wacky elements of it. Gonk is an absolute legend and to think he wouldn't have been in the alternate version is just insane. Another case of that is with Yzma, who should have got a song, but she's a great villain nonetheless. This one is a bit on the short side, but after all the issues it went through, it was very worthy of being released. Number 12, Wreck-It Ralph. It's nice to see some 2010s films making it this high up because I was worried when I originally made this ranking. This is a concept that I didn't think would work in 2D, so seeing it in the CG animated style for Disney was an excellent choice. It's good setup throughout with the foreshadowing going turbo, and the story overall works quite well. All of the gaming tie-ins and lingos all work, and the world building overall is successful. There isn't anything that I'd really want to change about this one, although I do have some issues with it. As with most of the 2010s films, if you'd like to hear me number 11 and just missing out the top 10 is The Hunchback of Notre Dame. To be honest, I didn't think it would make it this high up, but overall, there's not really anything I'd want to change about it except removing the gargoyle characters. Frollo is absolutely terrifying, and Hellfire is one of the most iconic Disney songs there is. As with Tarzan, the beginning of this film really hooks you, and the climax holds this to it. Not really much to say about this one really, let's move on. And number 10, Aladdin. Come on, it's a no-brainer to make it this far. The songs are all bangers, the opening bit with the merchant is great as it could be the genie or just some guy making up the story and it's left ambiguous. Jafar is a great and intimidating villain from the start and we already get his motivation as early on. The wishes are actually quite fun when they're used and the song transitions from the story are just seamless. This is when they really crack the code. The only thing I would say about the wishes is him wishing to be a prince, wouldn't it just actually turn him into one rather than making him a costume? Number 9, Atlantis the Lost Empire. Damn, I'm really sad this one didn't do as well at the box office. Milo's introduction sets his character up perfectly, and the twist about the rest of the crew is woven in throughout, and it's not coming across like a Han sort of twist. It's always been there. Just the lore and general background of Atlantis is really intriguing, and Kida has every right to be a Disney princess. Hot take, I think this would make an excellent live action film. I'm not on board with Disney doing all of these live action remakes, but at the pace they're going, hopefully they get here eventually. It's a film that they can expand on, see what didn't work at the box office, and also most of the characters are real people and not lions. Number 8, Moana. Wow, where to start with this one? The songs, the world building, the twist with the villain, all works really well. Tamatoa, great surprise villain and a good side quest. My issues with this film are with Maui. I'm not the biggest Dwayne Johnson fan, and Maui doesn't actually give an explanation to why he comes back at the end. I'm really worried where the sequel's going to go because of Disney's track record. Go and watch my little review on that, but I'm really hoping that Pua has a larger role in this one. Number 7, The Little Mermaid. You gotta give credit to the one that started the Renaissance in the best era of Disney. That's non-negotiable. Alan Menken and Howard Ashman really smashed it out of the park with this one, and the animation has aged really well. I like with the villain, with Ursula, that you know she's evil before the plot even starts, and she absolutely slays. All of the songs of this film are magical. It's weird that Ariel only gets one song, which they did supposedly fix in the live action one. Eric isn't too well fleshed out, but that's fine as he's sort of the side character. And the chef versus Sebastian is fun, but completely unnecessary. Now, this is where I'm going to get some hate. Number 6, Beauty and the Beast. Objectively, this is number 1. However, this is very much my personal opinion of the list. There's nothing wrong with this film. They absolutely smash it, and the music is masterful, everything down to the characters. Oh, I just don't know where to start with it, and many YouTube channels have already covered this. I'm just going to move on quickly so I don't dwell on the fact that it's this low on the list. Number 5, Tangled. The first major CGI film of that style, and it is gorgeous. Still holds up today. Everyone in that film is fit. All of the songs are good, Mother Knows Best is an absolute standout. I don't really like that there's so many reprises, and I wish we had a couple more songs maybe, but overall it's very well paced and all parts of the journey feel relevant and necessary, which is very important in a film like this. All of the characters are interesting with good motivations, and I can't really pick a favourite out of them. Number 4, Hercules, 10 out of 10 film. Hades is a perfect villain, Meg is a perfect love interest that also deserves to be a Disney princess like Kida, and Hercules himself is a great protagonist with a solid hero's journey. I love the gospel element of this film to make it a bit different in its sense of musical, and that really plays into the mythology overall. This is one that I know I can keep going back to and have a great time. Although I wasn't around when this film came out, this is very much a nostalgia one. Number 3, The Lion King. Excellent adaptation. Most people know by now that this is an adaptation of Hamlet, and it's a really interesting way of doing it. The shots are beautiful, and it's got many nice stills that just really show this animation style to the Scar absolutely steals the show with his song Be Prepared, and his plan overall is a really good one. Hans Zimmer's score is on point throughout, along with the songs which are all iconic. Mufasa's death is still something that will stick with me, and I don't know what they're doing with doing a prequel about Mufasa with live action, if we can even call it that. Pumbaa and Timon are excellent side characters, and the cyclical nature of the story is amazing. Alright, 2 to go. Number 2, Encanto. Now I think a lot of my nostalgia for this film comes with when I've watched it. I think I've watched it 6 times so far, and the first time was on the Christmas day during lockdown when they released it straight to Disney Plus after it wasn't in cinemas for too long, and I just sat there in my bed and wept. Lin-Manuel Miranda returns with an amazing set of songs, and everyone in the family is truly fleshed out. I was really worried with the marketing of this film because it didn't show too much, and I thought that it may expand on this family and go on this big quest, but the fact it keeps it so domestic and intertwined within the family and its generations is a very important message to put across. I worry for the one day when Disney decides to make a sequel of this because I think on its own it's perfect. Annabelle is a great stand-in for the audience, and I really connected with her. Abuela is a great antagonist, not villain. Her ideology all aligns and is very human, which is nice to see from an animated film of this scale. I think the timing of this one coming out during lockdown really helped its approach, as seeing this family all intertwined is something we all needed at that point. And finally, number 1, my favourite Disney animated film, Lilo and Stitch. Yes, you'll probably say that this has a lot to do with nostalgia, but to be honest, blending the sci-fi element and a domestic plot in Hawaii was what really sold me on this one. The pacing in this film is absolutely on point, and it really balances these two elements strongly. The dynamic between Nani and Lilo is completely believable, and bringing Stitch into this story is a really good deep dive and metaphor into looking at these issues. Now, along with many of the films also featured on this list, this is one that I would absolutely be willing to review in its own right, rather than this quick take on this list. My intention with this video was to do a little bit of an overview, and then I can make future videos if necessary. But yes, Lilo and Stitch, my go-to Disney film. I have a Stitch plushie, and that will stick with me all the time. Well, thank you for watching if you made it this far. I love these films and really want to see the studio succeed in the future. It's had some ups and downs in recent memory. Hopefully we have some new original films from them in the next few years. The slate is currently scheduled with lots of sequels. I would like to see Disney return to their 2D animated style and produce some more classic fairy tales. I know at one point they were doing a Jack and the Beanstalk in the works called Gigantic that was then scratched in the mid-2010s. I'd love to see them try and revive that idea. I'd be very interested. Eventually, I'll review Moana 2 when it comes out, though that's going to be in a while. Long year before then. 2024 looks to be a decent year of film, and I'm looking forward to reviewing anything that comes this way. In the meantime, please subscribe if you haven't already. It will really help the channel grow, and I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Have a look at the other content we got going on here. I'm going to do some more rewrite stuff soon. I've got my unscripted news that I've started doing weekly now. I'm just trying to put myself out there and see what happens. It's almost Oscars season, so I might go back and review some of the films that are in the front runners for big awards. Oppenheimer, looking at you. Anyways, have a good week, and hopefully see you back for another video next Friday.